Project 2025 co-author Roger Severino, who was the director of the DeVos Center for Religion and Civil Society at the Heritage Foundation in 2015, before being appointed to direct the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Health and Human Services during the Trump administration. He is known to be anti-LGBTQ rights, and in his role at HHS, he removed protections for LGBTQ people, allowing doctors to refuse to treat patients based on their sexuality or gender identity. What is his likely role in a future Trump administration if that happens, and what will the impact of that be for the trans community?
So it's difficult to know exactly where they would place him, but I think it would definitely be part of the plan to install him somewhere where he would be able to carry out these plans, perhaps as the head of the Department of Health and Human Services, where, as you know, part of Project 2025's plan is basically to deny civil rights protections on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity in the areas of healthcare and education. One of their core platforms is to argue that the Supreme Court's decision in Bostock, which held that employers could not discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, and to argue that that decision doesn't apply to healthcare, education, and a variety of other social services that the Department of Health and Human Services administers. And, other people who are part of Project 2025 and author different chapters, like Ken Cuccinelli, have argued that, homosexuality is a sin. And so these are the kinds of people that they are hoping to install at the head of the federal government to implement their vision of denying rights to transgender people, the queer community, women, and more. As Amara notes, they never just stop with one community. Instead, they just lump it all together under some umbrella to villainize, different communities and distract from the fact that, the biggest problems facing our country is frankly not where students pee or, what sports teams they are on. There are real healthcare crises, crises of gun violence, and this is part of an effort to distract the country from those real problems and allow them to then institute their agenda, which no one wants, and force it on the country.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So I wanted to react to a segment I saw recently where they seem intent on convincing people that we need to have gender identity within our laws, recognized within our laws to afford rights to LGBTQ people. And I want to remind people that part of the reason why women are in the situation that we're in now is because of the idea of adding gender identity to our laws, rather than simply having men and women, two genders. Once we start saying that somebody can identify however they want, and that needs to be recognized in the law, as opposed to just simply saying somebody is male or female, that's where we run into problems. Title IX, it has essentially erased rights that are exclusive to women or to females, and now included gender identity. So what was meant to protect women can now be used against women. If we say that we don't recognize someone's gender identity when it comes to them entering our bathrooms, when it comes to them entering our locker rooms, our showers, and eventually it's going to apply to competitive sports. If we say we don't want to compete against a male athlete, we could be accused of harassment and bullying because we're not recognizing that person to be the same as a female athlete. We're saying that that person is male, and therefore shouldn't be competing in the women's category. That could be classed as discrimination against someone on the basis of gender identity. We've seen what's happened in other countries like Australia with Tickle versus Giggle when it comes to somebody who wants a woman-only space, creating an app for women only. They're now saying that that goes against the Sex Discrimination Act because woman was removed and replaced with identity, with gender identity. Even though it's the Sex Discrimination Act, the act was based on biological sex. It's now being extended to include identity. So there are no women-only spaces. There are no women-only categories in sports because identity says that a man can be a woman. So what I'm finding is that the mainstream media want people to embrace the idea of identity and to do away with the two genders. And they're going to fearmonger about Project 2025, which I don't really care about, to be honest. Trump has come out and said that that's not his project. It's got nothing to do with him. If you go on his website, it's very clear that his project or initiative is Agenda 47. You won't see Project 2025 on there, but they're going to use that to say that Republicans want to take away rights of LGBTQ LGBTQ people. It's going to allow them to be discriminated against at work. It's going to allow them to be discriminated against when it comes to healthcare. This is what they're going to assert, simply because it's been proposed that we go back to sex-based rights based on biological sex and not identity. I do believe that that is what Republicans want to do. I do believe that's what Trump wants to do, especially when it comes to Title IX. He wants to restore the original purpose of Title IX.
As part of our new credentialing body for teachers, we will promote positive education about the nuclear family, the roles of mothers and fathers, and celebrating rather than erasing the things that make men and women different and unique. I will ask Congress to pass a bill establishing that the only genders recognized by the United States government are male and female, and they are assigned at birth. The bill will also make clear that Title IX prohibits men from participating in women's sports, and we will protect the rights of parents from being forced to allow their minor child to assume a gender which is new and an identity without the parent's consent. The identity will not be new, and it will not be without parental consent. No serious country should be telling its children that they were born with the wrong gender, a concept that was never heard of in all of human history. Nobody's ever heard of this, what's happening today. It was all when the radical left invented it just a few years ago. Under my leadership, this madness will end.
So I'm going to react to this segment where this trans activist is fear-mongering once again about Project 2025, but also pleading for identity to remain as part of our laws. And I don't think that's a good path to go down. I don't think that's a good path for women, and I don't think that's a good path for our young girls in colleges, in schools. I don't think it's a good idea for children. Once we start saying that identity takes precedence over biological sex, once we start writing in identity into our laws, we're going to be in the same situation that women in Australia are finding themselves in. We're already in that situation, to be fair, but it's only going to get worse. Sex-based rights afford people rights. If you're a male or female, which you can only be either or, you have rights, regardless of your sexuality or however you express yourself. It's illegal to discriminate against somebody at work because of what they do in their private life. As long as it's not against the law. If you say that, this person is gay or whatever, and if you discriminate against them because of that, that is against the law. There are already laws in place for that. Anyway, so let's take a look.
This week, dozens of prominent Republican leaders joined Democrats in filing their own amicus brief with the U.S. Supreme Court opposing a Tennessee law that bars transition-related care for minors. In it, they write, states have no business overruling decisions of fit parents who make an informed medical choice for their children that is supported by their doctors, by the medical profession more generally, by the children themselves, and by their conscience. Back in June, the Supreme Court agreed to resolve challenges to the Tennessee law and hear arguments this upcoming term. It will be the first time the conservative majority court issues a ruling in the battle over transgender rights for minors. This comes as 26 states, including Tennessee, have introduced bills to restrict gender-affirming care in the last few years.
You see how they're equating laws that protect children from these barbaric procedures. You see they're equating that to discrimination. They're going to say that that's discriminating against trans kids, when it's really saying that no kid should be given access to life-altering procedures when they're not even old enough to consent to those procedures. That's all it's saying. But of course, they're going to put their own spin on it.
And as the Republican presidential nominee, Donald Trump, continues to target the trans community and spread falsehoods about trans youth.
The transgender thing is incredible. Think of it. Your kid goes to school and comes home a few days later with an operation. The school decides what's going to happen with your child. And many of these childs 15 years later say, what the hell happened? Who did this to me?
Joining me now is founder and CEO of Translash Media, Imara Jones. Thank you so much for being here. Now, first, we have to just say this. There is no evidence whatsoever that any school has allowed or facilitated a transition, a medical transition of any student with or without parental consent. There's no evidence that any surgeries are taking place on school grounds. Now, Trump's defenders just say this is hyperbole. He misplaced the word. If he changed a few words, then it would be right. How dangerous is the rhetoric coming out of the former president on this issue?
Well, thank you for having me. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is a basis of U.S. law in so many places that parents speak for their children. So this idea that kids control, that schools control kids is made up. It's literally a fantasy. It's extremely dangerous. We know that the assault on trans people with the weaponization of government to target a specific group of people in the United States, specifically trans people, began as a part of a concerted effort under his administration. And we know that every year that he was in office, that year on year, anti-trans violence and anti-LGBTQ violence reached ever new heights during that particular time. And it's not only the physical violence, which we can keep track of, but it's also all of the forms of violence against the community, including cultural violence, policy violence, and political violence, in which this rhetoric creates the backdrop for that to have happened.
So, you know, they don't actually cite anything. They don't actually provide any evidence of that. It's just, we know that violence against trans people is because of Trump. And we just have to take their word for it. They don't provide any proof of that, of these statements. And obviously, I think people are well aware that they don't perform operations at schools. I think we're well aware of that. So we don't need MSNBC to clarify that for us. Just because Trump said what he said, I don't think people are going to go around thinking that they're performing operations at schools, removing the genitals of students at schools. I don't think people are going to walk away with that idea from what he said. But people with common sense understand what he's alluding to. Maybe he got his words muddled up, whatever, because apparently, you know, Trump doesn't get a pass with that. Biden, however, you know, we're supposed to ignore when he fumbles his words and makes all these unsubstantiated statements. You know, they've been telling us to ignore that for the last 3.5 years. Then all of a sudden, he's not fit to run. Okay. But he's fit to be president, though. He's still the president, apparently. What he's alluding to is the fact that schools are trying to overstep their role, which is just simply educate, and are now interfering in the relationship between the parent and the student. We know in California, these new laws have been passed that say that parents don't get the right to be informed if their kid is expressing confusion about their gender. The school can keep that information from the parents legally. That's what's been passed in California. So that is directly interfering between the relationship of the child and the parents. The school is overstepping their role and superseding parents. The school wants to know more about the kid than the parents. No. You know, that's what those laws are saying, that the school has the right to know more about your child than you do.
The classroom controversy continues over a new law stopping schools from telling parents if their child wishes to be identified as a different gender. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Rochelle Murcia. Michael Patterson is off tonight. Governor Gavin Newsom signed the Safety Act into law yesterday. Eyewitness News reporter Mary Pronian joins us now live in studio with local parents' reaction. Mary?
Well, Rochelle, just last week during a Board of Education meeting here at home, trustees and parents spoke out on students' rights, and some state officials believe it can come off as an attack against the LGBTQ community if parents get told.
I don't know why they would feel attacked. In my opinion, it should be the parents' choice on the way that they educate their children.
Governor Gavin Newsom signed into law the first in the nation bill which bans school districts from telling parents if their child identifies as a gender that's different from what's on school records, as well as using different pronouns. Assembly Bill 1955, also known as the Safety Act, was originally proposed in mid-May by California Assemblymember Chris Ward, and if not passed, it would have been what he calls a growing national attack on the LGBTQ community. On Tuesday, several reacted to this new law, including Tesla CEO and ex-owner Elon Musk. He announced his plan to move X and SpaceX from California to Texas. The billionaire says it comes in response to this new law, as he posted on X, calling it the final straw. I reached out to Assemblymember Chris Ward for comment, who sent a statement saying, and I quote, "We've heard this heretical threat before when Mr. Musk announced he was moving business out of California during the pandemic, only in reality to expand his operations in Silicon Valley. The fact is, California has one of the most productive economies in the world. We are proud to have a state that both stands up for the civil rights of others, while also providing a thriving environment in which to learn skills and prosper in entrepreneurial life, just like the conditions that have helped his companies succeed." And just last week here at home, the Board of Education brought this discussion forward once again, a policy that was introduced in 2023 regarding parental rights. Because of the policy's use of transgender-focused language, a lawsuit was filed by the state saying it discriminates against the LGBTQ community. Shortly after, a revised version was introduced, including all students. Now, even though the weather was hot in Bakersfield and many were camera shy, we were still able to get some reactions from people on this new law. Most of them said they don't want to be kept in the dark and be informed on what happens in their kids' lives.
I don't think parents should not be notified. I think they should know what their child is doing. They have custody of their child. They should know everything that's going on in their lives. We are responsible for our children. We have that right to, have a say in their lives until they become of age.
I would honestly like to be notified, at least that way I could put in my own opinion as far as how my kids are thinking or what they're believing, or I don't know, just dive deeper into the situation.
This law is set to take effect starting January 2025.
So that's what Trump was alluding to, and anybody with half a brain cell would be able to decipher that. We don't need MSNBC to clarify for us. And it's not only that, they're going to school and leaving, questioning their gender because of what they're being taught. Because they're taught that there's more than two genders. Because they're taught that they may have been born in the wrong body. These are the seeds that have been sown in our schools. And kids are coming away confused. Kids are coming away saying they want to change their name. They want to change their pronoun. A lot of it is starting in the schools. And that is very concerning for parents. Parents have also been accused of, mistreating their children by not using the pronouns that their kids want them to use, by not using the name that their kids want them to use. Because apparently a kid can decide their gender, a kid can decide their pronouns. And if the parent tells the kid to come back to reality, that parent can be accused of mistreating their children. And that can affect custody battles, that can mean social services get involved. A lot of it starts with the school.
And it's no surprise that increasingly paramilitary groups are picking up on his anti-trans messages.
Right. But, Project 2025, which is the right-wing playbook that many of Trump's allies have contributed to, they're taking the rhetoric part and trying to make it more formal, putting it in writing and making more policy about it. Some of the policies they propose include rescinding regulations prohibiting discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, transgender status, and sex characteristics, rescinding Biden-era Title IX protections to LGBTQ plus students, and eliminating transgender health care in Medicare and Medicaid. Talk to us about the escalation here and how these policies are going to affect not just the LGBTQ plus community, but all of America.
Well, if we were going to spend the entire segment reading out the anti-trans portions of Project 2025, we could both just walk off the set. That would be in the entire segment of a voice of God going through it in that way. I think that what's really important here is to realize that the people that wrote Project 2025 and focused the anti-trans segments of it are the exact same people who were behind the anti-trans policies in the Trump administration, namely Roger Severino. And before that was at the Heritage Foundation, which has become kind of a factory of anti-trans ideas in and of itself. And so this is a continuation. I think that one of the things that we're seeing is a surprise of Project 2025 right now, but it's a continuation of things that began under the Trump administration. And in so many ways, the roadmap for Project 2025 and the way that you weaponize the government to target a group of people began during the Trump administration with the focus on trans people. All they've done with Project 2025 is to expand the aperture to a much larger group of people. One other thing I want to say that's really important is that you cannot understand Project 2025 unless you understand the way in which anti-trans ideology is a motivation for the project in and of itself. It is in the forward, the very first bullet is one that says that the role of government is to protect children and to protect the idea of the American family. And when that's explained on the next page, it's full of anti-trans rhetoric.
So when you talk about protecting Title IX and ensuring that it provides rights to women and girls, that is, according to them, anti-trans rhetoric. But I don't see anything wrong with removing identity when it comes to discrimination and just focusing on biological sex. As it is, the laws addressed this a long time ago when it came to our civil rights. This was addressed a long time ago. But what they want to do is expand the law to include how somebody feels, to include a man saying that he's a woman. That's all this comes down to. And if you say that you think it should be based on biology and reality, then that's anti-trans. And they also equate it to discriminating against somebody based on their sexual orientation, all of those other factors. They're going to equate it to the same thing. When again, there are already laws in place that says that someone can't be discriminated against at work based on their private life, based on who they're dating or whether they like men and women. Those are already in place. You can't discriminate against somebody based on those factors. But they want to expand it. And they're just going to fearmonger and say that all of these rights are going to be taken away. Or LGBTQ people, for children, for trans kids.
The left-wing gender insanity being pushed on our children is an act of child abuse. Very simple. Here's my plan to stop the chemical, physical, and emotional mutilation of our youth. On day one, I will revoke Joe Biden's cruel policies on so-called gender-affirming care. Ridiculous. A process that includes giving kids puberty blockers, mutating their physical appearance, and ultimately performing surgery on minor children. Can you believe this? I will sign a new executive order instructing every federal agency to cease all programs that promote the concept of sex and gender transition at any age. I will then ask Congress to permanently stop federal taxpayer dollars from being used to promote or pay for these procedures and pass a law prohibiting child sexual mutilation in all 50 states. It'll go very quickly. I will declare that any hospital or healthcare provider that participates in the chemical or physical mutilation of minor youth will no longer meet federal health and safety standards for Medicaid and Medicare and will be terminated from the program immediately. Furthermore, I will support the creation of a private right of action for victims to sue doctors who have unforgivably performed these procedures on minor children. The Department of Justice will investigate Big Pharma and the big hospital networks to determine whether they have deliberately covered up horrific long-term side effects of sex transitions in order to get rich at the expense of vulnerable patients, in this case, very vulnerable.
Again, if you say that kids shouldn't be given access to something that can permanently alter their body before they're old enough to consent, then you're taking away the rights of trans kids. This is all this is about. They don't want women to have rights that are exclusively for females. That directly goes against their goal of affording those rights to men who identify as women, to men who say they're women. So you can't turn around and say, you're not allowed in this bathroom. You can't turn around and say, you're not allowed in these showers, in these locker rooms. And you certainly can't turn around and say, you can't compete in the women's category. So whether you call it 2025 or taking away the rights of LGBTQ people, what it comes down to is they want you to expand the law so that a man who wants to identify as a woman who feels he's been discriminated against will have some legal recourse and can ensure that people who are accused of discriminating against them are punished. So we will see more cases like Tickle versus Giggle. If women decide to fight these cases, we will see more of these cases as long as we allow identity to take precedence over reality and over biology and science. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.